My family thought it would be hilarious to leave me behind on a road trip. Let's see if he can find his way home. They laughed and drove off. I never went back. 9 years later, they tracked me down and are begging to help. I, 24M, was always the black sheep of my family. Not because I was a troublemaker or a failure, but because I was different. While my older brother excelled at sports and my sister charmed everyone with her social skills, I was the quiet one who preferred books to parties and coding to conversations. My parents never quite knew what to do with me, and my siblings treated me like an afterthought. The road trip happened during my last summer before college. My parents had planned this elaborate cross-country journey to celebrate my brother's graduation from law school. 3 weeks of visiting national parks, staying in fancy hotels, and what they called family bonding time. I should have known something was off when they insisted we take 2 cars instead of renting an RV like we discussed. The first week went surprisingly well. We visited the Grand Canyon, Yellowstone, and several smaller attractions. I actually started believing this might be the turning point for our family relationships. I was wrong. It happened at a rest stop in the middle of nowhere, Montana. I had gone inside to use the bathroom and grab some snacks for the road. When I came back out, bags in hand, both cars were gone. At first, I thought they were playing some harmless prank and would circle back in a few minutes. I waited and waited. 20 minutes passed before reality hit me. I called my dad's phone, and when he answered, I could hear laughter in the background. He told me they thought it would be funny to see if I could find my way home on my own. A character-building exercise, he called it. My mom chimed in, saying I was too dependent on them and needed to learn independence. My siblings were laughing so hard I could barely make out their words, but I caught enough to understand they thought this was the funniest thing they'd ever done. I stood there in that parking lot, hundreds of miles from home, with nothing but the clothes on my back and $37 in my wallet. My phone had maybe 4 hours of battery left, and the nearest town was 15 miles away. In that moment, something inside me broke and reformed into something harder. I hitchhiked to the nearest town and called my girlfriend, Sarah. She wired me enough money to get home via Greyhound, no questions asked. The 48-hour bus ride gave me plenty of time to think, and by the time I reached our hometown, I had made my decision. I packed everything I owned into my beat-up Honda Civic and left that same night. I drove to Portland, where Sarah was starting her internship. I never called my family to let them know I'd made it home safely. I never called them again, period. The first few months were rough. I worked 3 part-time jobs while finishing my computer science degree at Portland State. Sarah and I got a tiny studio apartment, and I threw myself into learning everything I could about software development. Every time I felt lonely or wondered if I should reach out to family, I remembered that parking lot in Montana and the sound of their laughter. College led to internships, which led to a junior developer position at a small tech startup. I was good at it, really good. While my former classmates were struggling to find entry-level positions, I was already building complex systems and solving problems that impressed my supervisors. The startup got acquired by a larger company after 2 years, and I suddenly found myself with stock options and a salary that made my parents' combined income look modest. Sarah and I got married in a small ceremony with just her family and a few close friends. We bought a house in the hills overlooking the city. I started my own consulting firm specializing in cybersecurity solutions for financial institutions. By age 30, I was pulling in mid-6 figures annually and had built a reputation as one of the most sought-after experts in my field. The irony wasn't lost on me. The family that had abandoned me for being too dependent had created someone who was almost aggressively independent. I handled everything myself, trusted few people completely, and always had multiple backup plans for every situation. The scared 24-year-old stranded in Montana had evolved into someone who controlled every aspect of his environment. I changed my name legally, not completely, but enough that casual searches wouldn't easily connect my current identity to my past. I scrubbed my social media presence and maintained strict privacy settings on everything. When Sarah asked about inviting my family to our wedding, I told her they were dead to me, and I meant it literally. As far as I was concerned, the person who had shared DNA with those people had died in that parking lot. Update 1. The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing security protocols for a major bank's new mobile platform. Sarah answered the phone in the kitchen, and I heard her confused tone from my home office. She knocked on my door and told me someone claiming to be my sister was on the line, saying there was a family emergency. My first instinct was to have Sarah hang up, but something in her expression made me take the call. The voice on the other end was older, more strained than I remembered, but definitely my sister. She was crying as she explained that our father had suffered a massive heart attack and was in intensive care. The doctors weren't optimistic about his chances of recovery. She begged me to come home, said the family needed me, that they had been looking for me for years, but I had vanished so completely they couldn't find any trace. She promised things would be different, that they understood now how wrong they had been. Our mother was apparently devastated, consumed with guilt over what they had done to me. I listened without saying a word, then hung up. Sarah found me an hour later, still sitting at my desk, staring at nothing. She asked if I was okay, if I wanted to talk about it. I told her what had happened 9 years ago, the whole story I had never fully shared with anyone. She was quiet for a long time, then asked what I wanted to do. I realized I didn't know. That evening, curiosity got the better of me, and I did something I hadn't done in almost a decade. I looked up my family online. What I found was surprising and, if I'm being honest, satisfying in a way I hadn't expected. My brother, the golden child who was supposed to become a successful lawyer, had been disbarred 3 years earlier for misappropriating client funds. He was working as a paralegal at a small firm and living in a studio apartment across town from my parents. My sister had gone through a messy divorce and was raising 2 kids as a single mother while working retail. My parents had downsized to a small condo and were struggling financially after my father's construction business went under during the recession. The family that had thought it was hilarious to abandon me had been systematically abandoned by success, stability, and security. Meanwhile, the son they had left behind had built an empire. 3 days later, my sister called again. This time she was more desperate, more broken. She told me our father was asking for me, that he wanted to apologize before he died. She said they had tried everything to find me over the years, hired private investigators, searched social media, even contacted my old college roommates. She mentioned they had found some old articles about my company and were amazed at what I had accomplished. Then she said something that stopped me cold. She told me they needed help with the medical bills, that the family was drowning in debt, and wondered if there was any way I could assist them financially. Not as charity, she was quick to clarify, but as a loan that they would absolutely pay back once things got better. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I told her I would think about it, and hung up again. Update 2. I decided to drive home the next weekend, not to reunite with my family, but to see for myself what had become of them. I needed to look into my father's eyes and understand if his regret was genuine or just the fear of a dying man who had run out of options. The 5-hour drive gave me time to prepare mentally. I had Sarah program a different contact number into my phone, one that would forward to her if they somehow got hold of it. I wore an expensive watch and drove my newest car, a BMW that cost more than my parents' condo was probably worth. These weren't accidents. The hospital was smaller and shabbier than I remembered. I found my family in the ICU waiting room, and the sight of them was jarring. My mother had aged 20 years and 9, her hair completely gray and her face marked by stress lines that hadn't been there before. My sister looked exhausted, wearing scrubs that suggested she was working in healthcare now, probably as an aide or technician. My brother was there too, in an ill-fitting suit that had seen better days. They saw me approaching, and the reaction was immediate. My mother started crying before I even reached them, and my sister stood up like she couldn't believe I was real. My brother looked ashamed, unable to meet my eyes directly. My mother tried to hug me, but I stepped back and remained standing while they sat. I asked about our father's condition, keeping my tone neutral and businesslike. The doctor had given him maybe a week, possibly less. He was conscious but weak, and yes, he had been asking for me repeatedly. My sister started apologizing immediately, the words tumbling out in a rush. She said they had realized their mistake within hours of leaving me at that rest stop, but by the time they turned around, I was already gone. They had driven back to our hometown expecting to find me there, but I had vanished completely. She claimed they had spent thousands of dollars over the years trying to locate me. I let her talk, watching their faces carefully. My mother kept reaching toward me like she wanted to touch my arm or hand, then pulling back when she remembered I had stepped away from her hug. My brother finally looked up and said he was sorry, that what they had done was unforgivable, and that he understood if I hated them. The interesting thing was, I realized I didn't hate them anymore. Hatred requires emotional investment. and I had moved so far beyond them that they had become irrelevant to my emotional life. What I felt was more like clinical curiosity, as if I were observing an experiment in human behavior. I told them I would visit our father, but only once, and only to hear what he had to say. Then I would leave, and they should not expect to see me again. My mother started crying harder, and my sister asked if there was any chance we could rebuild our relationship as a family. I looked at each of them carefully before responding. I told them that the person they had abandoned in Montana was gone, and the person standing in front of them was someone else entirely. Someone they had never bothered to know and never would know. I said I had built a life without them, a successful life, and I had no interest in complicating it with people who had proven they couldn't be trusted. My brother asked if I could help with the medical bills, his voice barely above a whisper. He said they were facing bankruptcy and losing the condo, and our father's insurance had been canceled when his business failed. I told them I would consider it after I spoke with our father. The conversation with my dying father was brief and strange. He looked fragile and gray, connected to machines that beeped and hummed around his bed. When he saw me, he started crying immediately and tried to sit up. He told me he was sorry, that leaving me behind was the worst mistake of his life, and that he had regretted it every day since. I asked him why they had done it, really done it, not the character-building nonsense he had fed me over the phone. He was quiet for a long time, then admitted they had thought I was weak, that I needed toughening up, and they believed abandoning me would force me to become stronger and more independent. The irony was staggering. Their abandonment had indeed made me stronger and independent, but not in any way they could have predicted or would benefit from. I had become strong enough to live without them permanently. He asked if I could forgive them, if there was any chance of reconciliation. I told him honestly that I didn't know, but that forgiveness and reconciliation were two entirely different things. I could potentially forgive them for being cruel and thoughtless, but I would never again put myself in a position where they could hurt me. He died 2 days later, while I was driving back to Portland. Update 3. My father's funeral was surreal. I attended wearing a black suit that probably cost more than most of the attendees made in a month, and I could feel eyes on me throughout the service. Word had apparently spread through our small town that the abandoned son had returned as a successful businessman, and people were curious about the family drama that everyone had heard whispered versions of over the years. I sat in the back, separate from my mother, sister, and brother, who were in the front row. During the eulogy, my brother mentioned how much our father had regretted his mistakes and how he had died hoping for reconciliation with his youngest son. It felt like a performance designed to make me feel guilty, but guilt was another emotion I had left behind in that Montana parking lot. After the burial, my mother approached me one final time. She asked if I would meet with them privately to discuss the family's financial situation and whether there might be any possibility of maintaining contact. She looked so broken and desperate that for a moment, I almost felt something resembling sympathy. I agreed to meet them at a coffee shop the next morning before I left town. The conversation was exactly what I expected. They were facing financial ruin. The medical bills from our father's final weeks had pushed them over the edge, and they were going to lose the condo within months. My sister's ex-husband had stopped paying child support, and she was barely making ends meet. My brother's legal troubles had left him essentially unemployable in any meaningful career. They asked, as directly as they could manage, if I would help them financially. Not as a gift, they were careful to emphasize, but as a loan or investment in their futures. They promised they would pay me back, and that this could be the foundation for rebuilding our family relationships. I let them finish their pitch, then pulled out my phone and showed them something I had prepared. It was a screenshot of my investment portfolio, showing a balance that represented more money than they would see in several lifetimes. I also showed them photos of my house, my cars, and an article about my company that had appeared in a major business magazine. I wanted them to understand exactly what they had lost when they drove away from that rest stop. Then I told them my decision. I would pay off all of our father's medical debts and give them enough money to stabilize their immediate financial situations. My mother would keep her condo, my sister would have enough to support her children comfortably for several years, and my brother would get a lump sum that could serve as a foundation for rebuilding his career if he was smart about it. The relief on their faces was immediate and overwhelming. My mother started crying again, my sister reached across the table to grab my hand, and my brother asked if this meant we could start over as a family. I pulled my hand away from my sister and told them the conditions. The money came with no strings attached and no expectations of future contact. I was not buying my way back into their lives. I was buying my way out of any obligation to them forever. They would never contact me again, never try to find me, and never tell anyone else how to reach me. If they violated these conditions, I would take legal action to recover every penny with interest. I also told them that the money was not forgiveness, and it was not reconciliation. It was a final transaction that would close the book on our family relationship permanently. I was giving them financial stability so that I would never have to wonder if they were suffering or worry that I should have helped them. This was me taking care of loose ends, nothing more. My sister asked if I would ever change my mind, if there was any possibility that someday we could be a family again. I told her that the family we might have been died in a parking lot in Montana 9 years ago, and the person who might have forgiven them and wanted them in his life had died there too. I had the money transferred to their accounts that afternoon and drove home to Portland. Final update. 3 years have passed since our father's funeral. True to their word, my biological family has not attempted to contact me. I occasionally wonder if they kept their promise because they understood it was final, or because they got what they needed and no longer saw value in pursuing a relationship with me. Sarah and I had our first child last year, a daughter who will grow up knowing she has grandparents who adore her and aunts and uncles who would never dream of abandoning her anywhere. She will never know about the people who share her DNA but not her life, and that's how I prefer it. My company has expanded internationally, and I've been invited to speak at conferences around the world about cybersecurity and entrepreneurship. Sometimes, during these presentations, I tell a version of my origin story about how being forced to become completely self-reliant at a young age shaped my approach to business and problem solving. I never mention my family specifically, but the lesson resonates with audiences who have faced their own moments of abandonment or betrayal. The most unexpected part of this entire experience has been discovering that revenge, when executed properly, doesn't feel like revenge at all. It feels like justice. I didn't set out to punish my family for what they did to me. I set out to build a life so successful and fulfilling that their absence from it would be irrelevant. The fact that they eventually came crawling back, desperate for help from the person they had thrown away, was simply a natural consequence of the choices they made. I sometimes think about that 24-year-old standing in the Montana parking lot, watching his family drive away while laughing at his predicament. I wish I could tell him that this moment, this abandonment, this betrayal, would become the catalyst for everything good that followed. That being left behind was actually being set free. My daughter will never know that feeling of being expendable to the people who are supposed to love her unconditionally. She will never doubt her worth or wonder if she's the family disappointment. She will grow up secure in the knowledge that she is wanted, valued, and irreplaceable. That's the real revenge against my biological family. Not the money I have and they don't, not the success I've achieved while they've struggled, but the fact that I've broken the cycle. The cruelty they showed me will die with their generation, and my daughter will inherit something they never gave me. The absolute certainty that she belongs somewhere and with someone. They may have thought they were teaching me independence that day in Montana, but what they actually taught me was how to recognize people who don't deserve a place in my life, and how to build something better without them. I never went back to them, and I never will. Some bridges are meant to be burned completely, so you can never be tempted to cross them again.